Donald Trump has issued his presidential pardons, including one for key political aide Steve Bannon. Mr. Trump earlier released a farewell video on his last day in office, saying he was proud of his achievements in the White House. This is the scene in Washington where Joe Biden will be sworn in as the 46th president of the United States. Security will be tighter than ever after the Capitol Hill riots nearly 2 weeks ago. On the eve of his inauguration, Joe Biden has led a powerful tribute to more than 400,000 Americans who've died from the pandemic. And Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny has released a video in which he alleges that $1 billion Black Sea palace belongs to Vladimir Putin. The video has attracted more than 20 million views.
Magnitude 6.2 earthquake strikes Indonesia's Sulawesi island, destroying many buildings. Many are reported dead and hundreds injured. U.S. Vice President Mike Pence meets National Guard troops at the U.S. Capitol to thank them ahead of next week's swearing-in of President-elect Joe Biden. In Uganda, longtime leader Yoweri Museveni leads in early presidential election results. Main opposition leader Bobi Wine says the vote was unfair. And North Korea holds a military parade in Pyongyang that shows missiles designed to be launched from a submarine.
Under strict security, President-elect Joe Biden will be sworn into office today. President Trump will not be in attendance at today's inauguration. He will mark his departure at a ceremony at Joint Base Andrews. After being sworn in today, Biden will take a range of executive actions. He's expected to implement a national mask mandate on federal property, as well as an order that will allow the U.S. to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord. We're also expected to see the permit for the Keystone XL oil pipeline to be revoked and a travel ban from several largely Muslim and African countries to be reversed. President Trump issued 143 pardons and commutations on his final day in office. Among those on the list, his former chief strategist Steve Bannon and one-time fundraiser Elliot Broidy. Alibaba's Jack Ma made his first public appearance in nearly 3 months amid speculation about his whereabouts. In a video link, Ma gave a speech to a group of rural teachers in China. He has kept a low profile since Chinese regulators started clamping down on his business empire. On today's earnings calendar, Procter & Gamble, as well as Morgan Stanley. Checking global markets, the Nikkei ended the day in the red, while the Hang Seng and Shanghai closed with some gains, with U.S. futures in positive territory.
We begin in Washington with Inauguration Day dawning. President-elect Joe Biden is set to be sworn in as the 46th President of the United States in a ceremony that will look far different than past transfers of power. Biden spent the eve of his inauguration paying tribute to the victims of the coronavirus, now totaling more than 400,000. Biden's presence at the Memorial Tuesday signals the importance of virus prevention to the new administration.
To heal, we must remember. It's hard sometimes to remember, but that's how we heal. It's important to do that as a nation. That's why we're here today. Between sundown and dusk, let us shine the lights in the darkness along the sacred pool of reflection. Remember all whom we lost.
Biden intends to make pandemic response his top priority. On his first day in office, he'll make masks mandatory on federal property and overturn the planned U.S. withdrawal from the World Health Organization. Then there's his promise of 100 million vaccine jabs in his first 100 days. Amid final preparations for Inauguration Day, 5 of Biden's cabinet nominees appeared at Senate confirmation hearings. His pick for Secretary of State emphasized a shift away from Trump's America First style of diplomacy. But Antony Blinken did agree that China poses a significant challenge and will need a strong hand.
I also believe that President Trump was right in taking a tougher approach to China. I disagree very much with the way that he went about it in a number of areas, but the basic principle was the right one, and I think that's actually helpful to our foreign policy.
Biden's defense nominee echoed these feelings, saying Asia and specifically China remains a focus of military strategy.
Globally, I understand that Asia must be the focus of our effort. And I see China in particular as a pacing challenge for the department.
Austin also pointed to the need to strengthen alliances, naming Japan, South Korea, and Australia. He says this region is at the top of destinations he hopes to visit. Biden's team will inherit a politically divided country still shaken by the Capitol riot. In front of that backdrop and with the continued danger posed by the pandemic, Washington remains under tight security ahead of Wednesday's ceremony. We'll be bringing you all the latest as the day progresses, so do stay with us. And just hours before the inauguration ceremony, Donald Trump has departed the White House, refusing to attend Biden's swearing-in. Trump is the first U.S. president in modern history to boycott the inauguration of his successor. He boarded Marine One for the last time as the head of state. Trump is heading for his private Mar-a-Lago club in Florida. In his last hours in office, Trump issued pardons and commutations for 143 people. His former advisor Steve Bannon is among them, but the list did not include himself or his family, despite speculation he would take that unusual step. A White House statement issued on Wednesday says Trump pardoned 73 individuals and commuted the sentences of 70 others. Bannon served as chief White House strategist, but in 2017, Trump dismissed him. Last year, federal prosecutors charged Bannon with fraud over a fundraising drive to build the Mexico border wall. He reportedly pleaded not guilty and was later released on bail. The New York Times suggested the executive action shows how many of Trump's associates face corruption allegations and demonstrates his willingness to use his power to help them. Moving to the Japanese Diet, where lawmakers launched deliberations on a number of issues, including the coronavirus response. The leader of the largest opposition party criticized the Suga administration's handling of the pandemic.
You ignored people's voices and postponed taking necessary measures. That resulted in the current situation, which we must call an explosive spread of infections. Why don't you first acknowledge the delay in decision-making?
I do not believe the government's response was delayed, nor was it based on empty optimism.
Edano also asked about a proposed revision to antivirus laws that would allow the authorities to penalize people who refuse to be admitted to hospital after testing positive for COVID-19. The opposition leader said the government should first provide more assistance to people.
The revisions are aimed at preventing further spread of infections. The penalties will be imposed on those who refuse to comply with a hospitalization request while giving due consideration to people's rights.
The Prime Minister said he'll submit the bill after hearing from the opposition camp. Meanwhile, the medical situation is continuing to intensify. The number of seriously ill patients across the country now tops 1,000. The figure has risen to a new high every day for the past 17 days. That's caused longer lines for being admitted to hospital. This woman in Tokyo describes what happened when her 84-year-old husband, who has an underlying lung condition, collapsed at home. An emergency team arrived shortly after, but they failed to find a hospital for him after contacting 6 institutions. Now he's being treated at home with his doctor making house calls.
Hospitals might have accepted him if he'd been in critical condition, but it was shocking that he was sent home.
Across the country, more than 5,500 new infections were reported on Wednesday. That brings the overall cases to nearly 350,000 since the outbreak was first confirmed last January. Nearly 4,800 people have died. Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny and his colleagues have released a video of what they say is President Vladimir Putin's lavish estate on the Black Sea coast. The Kremlin has dismissed the claim. Navalny's Anti-Corruption Foundation on Tuesday released a video of what it calls Putin's palace. It claims the 7,000-hectare property is worth about $1.3 billion. The video includes 3D images of the interior based on information from people involved in its construction. It says the estate has a theater, a casino, and greenhouses. Navalny's team says it's learned through public documents and bank transactions that Putin's wealthy friends and the heads of state-run businesses shouldered the construction costs. The team calls it the biggest bribe in history. The video attracted more than 15 million views in less than 24 hours. The president's spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, has dismissed the allegations, saying, quote, "We explained many years ago that Putin does not have any palace," end quote. Navalny was detained by Russian authorities on Sunday upon returning to his home country from Germany. His supporters plan to hold protests across Russia on Saturday. Chinese President Xi Jinping has inspected preparations for next year's Winter Olympics and Paralympics in Beijing. He said he's confident the Games will be successful. Beijing will host the Winter Olympics in February 2022 and the Paralympics the following month. It'll be the first city to have hosted both the Winter and Summer Games after it was the site of the 2008 Olympics and Paralympics. China's state-run media say Xi visited Zhangjiakou in Hubei province, which borders Beijing, on Monday and Tuesday. He was briefed on construction of the skiing and skating venues and on how athletes are training. Xi reportedly expressed relief that preparations are going as planned. China has seen a resurgence of coronavirus infections, mostly in Hubei province, since the beginning of this month. Chinese authorities will face the challenge of keeping the virus under control during the winter months when the Games will be held. A Thai court has sentenced a woman to more than 43 years in prison for criticizing the royal family. It's believed to be the longest sentence ever handed down for violating the country's lese majesty law. Rights groups have expressed concern that it poses a threat to freedom of expression. The Bangkok Criminal Court found former civil servant Ancham Prilert guilty of 29 violations of sharing audio clips on social media that were considered insulting to the monarchy. The country's strict lese majesty law carries a 3 to 15-year penalty for each violation. The 65-year-old woman, who was arrested in 2015, was initially sentenced to 87 years in prison, but the term was reduced to half because she agreed to plead guilty. The ruling comes at a time when police are increasingly clamping down on anti-government demonstrators who openly question the role and wealth of the royal family. In recent months, more than 40 protesters have been summoned for questioning by police, but none were jailed. Last week, a student who had taken part in several protests was arrested and later granted bail after he was caught criticizing the monarchy. Lawyers say it was the first time the law has been applied to the demonstrators. In California, unusually warm weather along with strong winds have led to new blazes. Our meteorologist Sayaka Mori has the details.
Hello there. We don't usually talk about wildfires in California during this time of year because winter is generally a wet season for the area. However, new wildfires have started in parts of California. Winds are very strong as well. Gusts were nearly 150 kilometers per hour in Southern California. It looks like winds will remain strong although the peak is over. There's a possibility of more wildfires in parts of Southern California. But good news, there is a risk for heavy rainfall in parts of the state. So hopefully that will improve the situation, but be careful of flash flooding. Meanwhile, let's go